And one more. I guess I should go ahead and notify Facebookers, the Zuckerborgs. I don't use Facebook anymore. If you use Facebook, it just means that you somehow escaped their. It's not just censorship, it's embarrassing. They put you in their prison, they put you in Facebook jail. I've served about 5 or 6 sentences and I realized, you know what, they're never going to accept me. At no point am I ever going to be welcome at their party, and I'm fine with that. We don't need to breathe their air, we have our own. All right, let's see here. Les Goes joined us there in the chat. Awesome. Tommy Jones. Okay, cool. Now, I haven't sent out notifications yet. Going to. I'm not being lazy, it's just that I'm testing out a couple of features. Like, for example, I put a fan in the corner of the office because I think I'm too loud for the chiropractor and the hypnotherapist on either side of me. And I'm like, I don't know what kind of ideas I'm putting into people's heads. So, out of courtesy, no one asked me, no one accused me of being too loud, but I'm just, preemptively using a fan to block out noise. So I think I should be able to hang out here mornings as well. Now, again, I'm going to send out notifications in a moment, I suppose. The main development, though, is this. I just got the Auto Hoaxology 101 textbook in, the first batch. And I'm going to have to hang on to these until Monday, because Monday we have a media crew coming in from a very large newspaper in Europe. They're going across America, from what I can tell, or at least the Southwest, and they're interviewing a number of conspiracy theorists. Not just any conspiracy theorists, but people who talk about the shape of the world, or the lack thereof. And they're going to be meeting at the headquarters here with me and anybody else who wants to come down to Albuquerque for the first IPS headquarters meetup. And this is just the first. We've already been talking about this plan for ongoing cyber symposiums, where we address one topic at a time. I bring in a panel of experts. We sit in the conference room. We have the dry erase board, and we debate and discuss concurrently, live and in person. And that this is going to be a common facet of the IPS think tank. And now we're at the stage where we begin to move the think tank across the world stage, confronting it directly. Set controls for the heart of the world stage, just right to the middle. No longer on the fringe because we're outside of their censorship zone. Now we can start interacting in the real world because now we are a real news agency, and the only one operating from an off-world stage perspective. So the first thing they're going to see when they come into the office here are the publications. They're going to see the Auto Hoaxology 101, which will be the basis for most of what I say. It's the framework. But also they're going to see the tabloid, which is what we're going into next. We're going into the production of the IPS Insider tabloid, and we're going to activate all of our on-the-street reporters. And our reportage is going to be next level. This isn't fake, undercover, ambush journalism. No, I'm thinking more traditional, but gonzo level, as in deep reporting, deep dives. And the penguin is the deepest diving of all diving birds. All right, joined here by Frank Murr, Junders Plunkett, Linda Curtis, 737, Copacetic, JT33 says, hey now. You know, on your iPhone how it stores videos in your iTunes player or whatever? Just on a weird coincidence last night, it played a JT33 rap. JT33 as Eric Dubay, the self-described Yoga Moses, rapping from his ice cream truck, trying to recruit kids into getting the Flat Earth app because it's not a piece of crap. Anyway, it was just kind of surprising, and nobody in the car with me knew what we were listening to, but they liked it. It's definitely funny, and we need to get back to producing South Pole now that we're exiting the censorship zones. But to continue, I was contacted, and look, I haven't been very specific about who it is because we have saboteurs. I don't know if you know this, but back when the flat Earth topic was going viral. ABC News, CBS, every agency was talking about it. At that time, there were dozens, I'm talking dozens, probably 30 or 40 interviews, many, many interviews that were headed towards Mad Mike Hughes. So he could talk about his plan to launch the rocket, confronting NASA and their claims, etc. And those were intercepted. Those were intercepted by our stalker who created a fake website front, and he bragged about it. He bragged about how many interviews he managed to block. I've had instances of people contacting agencies ahead trying to essentially blackball us, bury us, and I don't want that to happen this time. Although I think it's definitely too late because they're here. They're in America. They're driving from California to here. We spoke for about an hour this morning. They wanted to get an idea of who or what I am and how I operate. And they understand pretty clearly that I work out of an HQ, but that we're part of a think tank. So part of what they want to do is they want to film this this interaction, and they want to understand, are we serious? Where are we coming from? How do we make these statements? And we got into some pretty nuanced explanations as to like how do I justify making this claim? What are the claims that we're making, and what would constitute evidence that would change our minds, etc. And we had a conversation about fakeability, about how I know some people who don't believe in pandas, but the reason why is the flawed logic. And the fakeability of it is, yeah, you can fake a panda bear, animatronics, animation, people in costumes, but can you fake it at scale and fool the world, zoos worldwide? No, that would include a conspiracy of millions or hundreds of thousands. But when it comes to space, there's only a handful of people that filter the information that we get. And just like maybe 500 people can actually verify they've been there supposedly, whereas any of us can go to the zoo. So what we're talking about is access to information, and it is not rational to say pandas don't exist, but it is rational to say space as represented is highly questionable and easily fakeable. And I also kind of made the point too that it's really more important to emphasize worldview over shape, because the worldview ultimately is the only thing we experience. You can't experience the shape, flat or round. You're too small, always will be. You never have to account for it. And the meaning of this worldview versus shape thing is that if you believe that it's a ball, that's your worldview, then you accept the limitations, the constraints, the scarcity, the environmental conditions that they say exist. You accept the premise of ICBMs, of space junk, of basically alien invasions, anything you can think of that's science fiction entered into the realm of possibility when you entered into the worldview as described by the Nasatologists. Oh, by the way, Nasatology is what I'm calling it now. Actually, I'm working on an article about this. I've been juxtaposing Scientology and NASA, an equally scammy, fake space religion. And I'm like, let's just call them Nasatologists. I've been arguing with these folks on Twitter, and they're part of a religion. They're doing damage control. They're very culty. They're very much like Scientologists. Now, the worldview question, though, is this. In my worldview, certain things are outside the realm of possibility. And the difference it makes is that I no longer have to blindly accept certain things, and it causes me to have to analyze each and every premise they assert. And that's where we're at right now, where we are philosophically examining the problem of existing in a hyper-mediated world where the mediation is coming from a very specialized and narrow interest group. And that this is not something that's being argued from ignorance. Then we talked about the curve. And I'm like, look, I believed as a kid that the Earth curved and that boats went over the horizon, and ancient Greeks told us so. But then the P900 came out, and it let us see with telescopic lenses that that's more or less an optical illusion, that these boats are actually visible much further away. So there goes your physical perception of a curve. Now you've never seen a curve. Now you're lying if you say you have. Moreover, the Felix Baumgartner jump and others are all just GoPro lens distortions that give people a false perception, but that when you look at high altitude flights like U-2 planes, you don't see the curve. So no one has actually, quote, seen it. So this is where the conversation gets into what we're actually saying. Isn't that we believe we're on a disk in space, as they often misrepresent, but that we're suspending judgment, or rather suspending our agreement, withholding assent on what they say until we get more information. So we're the only ones here who don't walk around claiming we have all the answers. We're not the smug nasatologists. Oh, we already know it all. Our ignorance ends at the edge of the universe. But we know everything else. It's like, no, I kind of think that's the big ruse. And I think that space, and I even explained this, and like they heard me out, which is probably going to be good because my whole point is that I believe space is just a metaphor for inner space, mind control. And what they have done with this false model, if we're right, is they have given us a false model to reduce the size of our world concept. And it's about enforcing scarcity. And I did draw the analogy to the movie The Village, where you have the children born in a commune thinking it's the 19th century because their parents want to insulate them from the world, quarantine them from the modern world and its problems, and they find out they're in the 20th century. And I'm saying that, yeah, we're likely in the same situation. In fact, it is the case that we are in that situation. It's just a question of, is the village that we're in a physical village, or is it merely mental? Are we merely being held into a false world paradigm, and or is there actually a geographical distortion? And this is another point. When you look at maps, like, do we really think that the same people that write history, that write the news, are honest when it comes to cartography? The only thing that matters? We could talk about ideas all day, but ultimately it's about property. It's about who owns the world, the ground. And it's kind of naive to think, well, yeah, everybody lies at the top, but when it comes to the shape and the size and how much land there is, yeah, they're not going to lie about that. Give me a break. Going through your comments here. JT33 says the world wasn't ready for Yoga Moses. Yeah, I don't think so. I don't think that Dubé is going to live to see his promised flat land of Nazi yogis or whatever he's doing. Salty says red pandas are so cute they almost look fake, but I think the same about my dog. Correct. And many things look fake doesn't mean they are fake. Many things look real doesn't mean they are real. But when it comes to the fakeability thing, pretty much everything is fakeable. Quite literally, even nukes. They can fake planets. If everything is fakeable, we have to include that in our worldview. But the main distinction is it fakeable at scale? And that's where you can separate the absurd notions of platypuses and koalas are fake from, well, things that are actually non-existent, or things that, it's just like, I think that there's this flood of so many different theories and ideas and no context, where it's almost just interchangeable, it doesn't matter. And I have to wonder, are people saying these things for clickbait, or are these legitimate assertions? And if you're going to make that a legitimate assertion, then you're giving away your operating system, that you think in stereotypes. Oh, well, these 5 pandas are fake, therefore all are fake. Well, those were cherry picked. And then there's one other point here. To make a snap judgment on whether something is real or fake based on a few clips is technically rushing to judgment because you don't have all the information. Like that sun bear that went viral because people thought it was a human being in a costume. Well, if you had only looked at the footage 30 seconds before and 30 seconds after, you would have said that's not a person, no way. So context is everything, but the media purposefully trains us to rush to judgment based on their selectively curated version of events. All right, let's see. If you're looking at the screen, those are hardbacks. Yeah, the Autohoaxology 101 textbook is only going to be available in hardback. I'm going to make a couple adjustments before I place the next bulk order, but these ones are going out signed Monday, right after the film crew leaves. It's kind of interesting how this worked out because I decided that it was time to somehow since we have the headquarters now, to establish a footprint in the Meatverse, because they control the metaverse. We know this. But the Meatverse, they don't totally control. And I thought, let's go ahead and get this textbook out there and get some sort of visual accompaniment to it. So I started working on a video, and I've been working on this for about 6 weeks now, mostly just doing B-roll. I went out to the zoo and I recorded gorillas and other things that have been accused of not existing, and things that are alleged to not exist or to be human beings in costumes. So I'm just stocking up on B-roll, and then I started contacting local independent media, inviting them over to the headquarters to interview and talk about this subject, not to debate, but to talk about it. And I acquired a list of about 7 or 8 local reporters who are very interested in this project, this video project, which I've described as something of a documentary, but not quite a documentary, more of an explanatory of the textbook, Autohoaxology 101. So I've already been working on this all this time, and then coincidentally, just as the books arrive, a news agency from Europe has arranged to send their locals over here to do exactly what I was going to do anyway, only I don't have to pay them to report, which is kind of interesting. I'm just saying it's a fascinating coincidence. And I ask, would this have happened, or would they have arranged this? Would this even be a thing if I wasn't already building it? If you build it, they will come. Sorry, Brian Stavely, for my Mandela effect, but sometimes I wonder about causality. Not that I engage in magical thinking necessarily, but I think when you take any action, you open up doors, meaningful, targeted action, and I think doors open that you don't even see, that facilitate things that were not possible right before. Joined by P Trippa 103 says, question, is it still possible that countries still have large explosives? Well, yeah, fireworks exist, bombs exist, but the premise of the nuke was all symbolic and alchemical. And I've been looking at the timing of it. This is fascinating when you get into it. You know, the first UFO sighting, 1946. The nuke tests, 1946. There's a reason for that. Some say the nuke tests caused the aliens to come to put a stop to it. That's when the government's there's all these stories about it, but they've never been separate. And now we can add into this 1946 thing that the first UFO sightee, because they say 1947, but it was actually 1946. It was Marjorie Cameron. When you take into account who it was, it gets even more interesting. It's all stories, what I'm saying. The Oppenheimer movie, I haven't seen it yet, but it combined with the Barbie movie are actually connected in many levels as well. It has to do with the advent of the bombshell and the archetype of this new goddess. But everything's fakeable, absolutely. Um, I think there are many ways you can describe. I mean, look, the mainstream media can take a rain shower, spring shower, and turn it into a hurricane. It's all about reporting. You've seen them do it. You've seen reporters leaning into the wind, and then some jogger walks by, casually vertical. It's like, oh, the wind is only on this side of the street. Like, they fake stuff all the time. They have turned our reality into a Truman Show. Gwillem Bradford says, our news stories and fakes aren't the only thing that are fake. Oh, yeah, everything's fake. Mary Curie is fake. Mary Curie, Mercury. Yeah, the worldview is entirely fake. And the news isn't news. This is the big lie. The big lie is that the mass media is just a bunch of people with cameras and microphones gathering intel for you as a service, right? Because they want you to be totally up to date and informed. No, their purpose is to misinform, it's to maintain a false worldview. Spirit Jordak says, if you reveal too much to the EU press, they will bury it, treat them as newbies. Well, I don't know the full scope of this, and I haven't said very much because, again, I don't want to set off any alarms until it's too late. But this is probably going to be, yeah, it's going to be in this European newspaper, but it's probably going to be translated pretty much instantly. Now, I don't get the feeling it's a hit piece, but it doesn't have to be a hit piece to turn into a hit piece. It's just all about how the media reports on it. And do you really think that anybody in the mainstream media is going to take some critical analysis of their life's work, of their job, of their careers, and treat it like anything but toxic? No, this is definitely toxic. Like I said, we're setting the controls of the think tank to the heart of the world stage. We're actually aiming for this clash because in the clash, we can, in the chaos, it will draw out a lot of ideas and opinions and individuals into the fray, and we want that to happen. Because what we're doing here is we are exposing a vacuum, and we're already in it. We're occupying this vacuum, this off-world stage perspective, and it doesn't exist. It doesn't have a platform, and it will. I mean, it does with us with this tank, but what we have to do is we have to tap into the various closed systems on the far conspiracy fringe that have, for some various reasons, I think it's mostly because of the false flag theory, but they've wrongfully assumed that most of what they see is real, but it's just worse than they think. It's like, no, you actually, you don't see through the matrix by walking into the screen. You got to step back. Like they have everybody with their face to the screen. That's your reality. The conspiracy theorists tend to walk through the screen and go deeper, and they get a deeper story. It's more intriguing, but it's a deeper level of dream. It's the nightmare. And what I'm proposing is the stepping back, the minus, the subtractive view, the MSM minus. And I think there are many people who are in the matrix deeper than they should be, thinking that they're awake because they're hooked on this red pill fear porn. And I think that there's possibly tens or hundreds of thousands of minds that would be more inclined to take the true skeptic's approach. And the skeptic isn't the one that is just contrarian, counter narrative, and reactionary. Quite the opposite. The skeptic is the one that is pausing before agreeing, pausing before rendering judgment. And that's us. I'm perfectly fine and have been for several years saying, I don't know if the world looks specifically like the way they say. I just don't believe it. And you don't know it because it's not possible for you to know it. It's merely an optional belief. And from a broader perspective, I think you could properly contextualize the shape of the world, the globe itself, as just a God construct. It's the main unifier. It's the umbrella belief that unites everybody. Going through some comments. Evolvement says blue moon tomorrow. I haven't been talking about synchronicities a lot lately, but I want to because I had a conversation on Twitter with someone who said, those are just coincidences. I'm like, well, at what point does it become a pattern? Like how many times? And I find people are able to just overlook obvious patterns. And I think, well, what is the mental process there where they're filtering out meaning? Like they sense it's meaningful, but something in their head screams at them. They got some cop in their head, some thought cop. It's like, don't think that, don't connect those dots. That's crazy. It's like, how convenient. Anybody begins to see that in order to, like, to really see, you have to take this holistic view of media. You can't separate Hollywood from politics, from entertainment, from history, from any of it, because it's all worldview. And if people begin to correlate all the different aspects of it, the believers are trained to see that person as possessed, as evil, as somehow their mind's gone askew. And what I'm here to point out, and that's what the whole purpose of Auto Hoaxology 101 is that we're operating from a different framework. And it's all about frames, and it's not hard to understand how this all works when you think about, for example, the frame that on Christmas, that a child views Christmas versus an adult. The adult knows Santa's fake but plays. The child doesn't, or probably does, but is still playing along, but everybody's playing along. It's just an agreed upon set of rules, and one person, the adults, are respectful of the frames of the children. They don't want to ruin the fun. So there's just different references that they have. And, I wouldn't call it lying because it's just a harmless holiday activity. It's just technically play. But with the media, is what I'm saying here, is that they have a framework that you adopt when you believe their stories wholeheartedly as though it's been vetted, as though you can trust it. And it is kind of childish. There is a childish dynamic between the media and the media consumer. I describe the dynamic as that between a narcissist and a codependent in emotional bondage by design. Big Brother is a narcissist. You don't see Big Brother as a singular entity because they realized that people can rebel against something they can see. So now the Big Brother has been decentralized, it has been fragmented, and it exists with many different facets, but you can't see the whole thing unless you're capable of taking that step back. The off-world stage perspective is the main key point to all of this. It's the point where you have to say, well, maybe I don't have enough information to come to a conclusion, and it leaves you with a lot of question marks. And I pointed this out before, that question marks are eventually going to be banned. They're going to take them off your keyboards. Like, check your keyboard if it's new. Does it have a question mark anymore? I was worried they were going to send UN troops back in 2020 and kick down doors in the middle of the night and rip the question marks off your keyboards. Why do you need them for? What do you need question marks for? If they have all the answers, and if deviating from those answers is wrong, then why do you need question marks? You see how that works? If it was a question, it wouldn't be publishable. It would be sent. If it would be, yeah. It's in other words, it's like questioning your faith. In other words, they've made questioning the media tantamount to questioning your religious faith. And for many people, my argument here is that it is their de facto religious faith. It has replaced and supplanted the role of religion in modern life. Gwillem Bradford says, I found an old conspiracy encyclopedia I read years ago. It's obvious now it was all alternative versions of things that never happened. Great way of putting it. Most conspiracy theories, I'll say all conspiracy theories, are alternative versions of things that never happened when it comes to these popular ones. Direct energy weapons, second shooters, biolabs. You have so many different storylines that you can choose from that all agree with the central premise. For example, 9/11, was it done by direct energy weapons, tactical nukes, thermites, Skull and Bone Society, Jews, or Muslims? And when you get into that, you're like, well, okay, well, we can accept it was done by Muslims, but it was paid for by these guys. So you have like a million different versions that you could take from this. You could just choose your own fantasy to go with, and it's all just leading you in circles because you're not apprised of the central fact that maybe it didn't even happen. And this is a big deal because look at all the white nationalist types who say Jews did 9/11, they have to pay. I'm like, okay, well, if 9/11 didn't happen, then who has to pay? There's like, if it's not real, then are your grievances real? And if your grievances aren't real, then what of your worldview based on those grievances? Like, so what I'm saying here is that the mass media infrastructure holds a lot of people's worldviews together. I call it the lie world order for a reason. And a lot of people hold on to it because it's how they see the world. And if you challenge its premise, it leaves them in a void. And I don't think people are comfortable in the void. And for me, the void is where we are. That is the off-world stage. You get off the earth, you're in the void of space. You step off the world stage, you're in the void of, I'm suspending judgment on things that I can't verify so I don't become another believer lost in a world of subjective belief. We have the true overview effect. We've ascended, metaphorically speaking. I mean, look, they have. I mean, honestly, they do. They say, we have the overview effect because we've gone to space, and from up here we can see the intrinsic need for oneness in all things. Like, they claim this phony higher perspective. Well, we're not claiming a phony higher perspective. I'm saying we're the only true objectivists left. So, are we ascended above the cess of the MSM's implemented worldview? Yes. They shouldn't even be censoring us. We're film critics. We're movie critics. We're PSYOP critics. Going through some comments. Echo Charlie says, awaiting the one narrative that wins out. But then there's the Kraken narrative. Too many people were at home watching real time 2021. They really managed to turn January 6th into a new 9/11. And by the way, I'm going to be speaking to Woo's News as soon as he's done with his project. Let me see if he's messaged me. That's why I came in early today. I was hoping to touch base with him. But I had to jump on here today early because we are going to be live later for phones. But I'm wrapping up a bunch of art and other things, and I had these new books to put up on the shelf. I'm going through it. I'm going to make a couple of changes. I have a few ideas. I want to put something on the spine, but those of you who ordered these will be going out. I needed these as props for the interviews that I was scheduling before I knew that this European news agency was coming. Like I needed these for the self-produced thing I was doing, which I'm still doing. I just think it's fascinating that I prepared for something, and now it seems like it was inevitable. Which is a sense that I get. What we're doing does I get the sense that this is a vacuum that exists and has existed for a long time, and there's a lot of people in this vacuum, but they're not consolidated, they're not networked, and that's all been because of the intentional efforts of the other side. Infinite Muse says cognitive dissonance is too uncomfortable to transcend for most people. Yeah, I was thinking about this today. I was like, the main thing that holds this system together, I say lie world order, but it's ego. Because the eyes, the senses lie to some extent, or you have the possibility of perceptual errors, of optical illusions, and then there's deliberate trickery that feeds into your biases. Then on top of that, you have sleight of mind, logical fallacies you may not even be aware of, tricks of the media trade. It's like a carnival, and all these rubes, all these dupes. There's a sucker born every minute. They don't know. They don't know the tricks that these are unwinnable games. War Games, the movie says, the only strange game, the only winning move is not to play. And that's true. You go to a carnival, there are some games where you just lose. So you have to have fun. That's the whole point of it, is to have fun. But the cognitive dissonance that prevents people from leaving, yeah, that's because I think there's this ego attachment to being right. And when you get in, you're duped, you're tricked, and you have to be able to recognize you've been tricked. I think it was Mark Twain, he said, it is easier to fool a man than convince him he's been fooled. And then you attach to that, most people are fooled when their emotions are tapped into. So it bypasses their logic. So now you're trying to deal with an emotionally held conviction. But this is why I think it's very important from the outset to establish a distinction between things that we believe and things that we know. Because most people understand the difference between religious beliefs and scientifically held convictions. And some people can reconcile it, others can't. But there is a distinction. And what I'm saying is with media, they have turned the average consumer of media into a religious fundamentalist in terms of their psychoepistemology. They're appropriating new information, they're getting their news through their emotions, their feelings, consensus. A lot of it is just pointed at their emotional take on things. It's non-rational. It's feelings based. Save the children. Okay, I like the idea, save the children. But let's attach that to something objective. Not these hypothetical children in tunnels being trafficked by the reptoids, or the hypothetical children that got vaporized by direct energy weapons from China. Space lasers. Like, those aren't real children, but it's an emotional appeal. Like, why wouldn't you save the children? Oh, you don't want to save the do children? You must be a groomer. That was the argument for that movie. Oh, you didn't see Sound of Freedom? I think we have a groomer here. Then you find out Sound of Freedom was Sound of Farce, as fake as anything else that's promoted by the mass media. You don't hear anything about Tim Ballard now. Where's Tim Ballard? Parachuting in to Hawaii, right? Isn't that where he is? Isn't Tim Ballard parachuting in behind the lines that the police put up in Maui, looking for the dead kids or hidden kids or tunnel kids or missing kids? No, he's not. He's spending money that should have gone to the director of the film who didn't make any money off of it. Tommy Jones says someone posted a comment on one of IPS's streams about $6 Million Man Season 1, Episode 11, with William Shatner as an astronaut that comments that the Earth is flat. Okay, we will have to research that. Does anybody have any information about William Shatner saying that the Earth is flat? Shatner's a very interesting character, by the way. I think Captain Kirk is based on Captain Cook, who explored the new frontier back when it was the oceans. I think Captain Kirk going to space represented, well, William Shatner going to space represented space being the new frontier, and he went up there with Bezos' company. Bezos, Texas, cowboy hat, richest man on earth, sees space as a new frontier to go pull down mineral wealth, mining asteroids, bringing more capitalism down, which would be very destructive. It would be very destructive to the environment, etc., according to the main narratives. So then he says, when he comes down, that the Earth is facing some kind of catastrophic event. And he was crying, and he said, looking down at the world, he felt like he was at a wake for Mother Earth. Like these are all influencers. You know, we talk about influencers all the time, social media influencers. Well, every single movie star is an influencer. They're all packed with agenda. They're all packed with things that they may not even know, but memes, archetypes. Angle of Elevation says, since the root of conspiracy is to conspire that involves two people, the silly conspiracies that don't involve anyone conspiring, just your alt belief, aren't they in fact not conspiracies at all? Yeah, technically what you're saying is we're looking at projection. Like when they say, oh, the hoaxers. The hoaxers are saying that the school shooting's a hoax. Okay, that doesn't make sense. Because if I'm saying it's a hoax, I'm accusing them, the media, of being hoaxers. But then they're calling me a hoaxer for calling them hoaxers. I'm like, no, I'm the hoax accuser. There's a difference there, but it's projection. And I think what they're doing is they're conspiring to keep everyone in the dark. And if you call it out, they call you a conspiracy theorist. And they are conspiring. I talked about penguins being the deepest diving of all birds. Emperor penguins, the deep dive thing. And there's a number of ways that penguins fit this think tank as a mascot because of the way that we are operating the world. The deep dive, of course, self-explanatory. But then you have the phenomenon of penguins huddling, where they huddle together and they breathe in. They conspire. And the conspiring of penguins in a huddle actually warms the air. Now, the warmth that they create shields them against the cold, windy, harsh conditions, etc. But this, to me, represents sort of what we're doing. Our conversations go against the darkness, the ignorance, the ice, the secrecy. And so we're in this barren environment, the barrenest environment of all, the fringe conspiracy realm of total censorship. And we're conspiring. We're talking about these subjects. And to me, that is creating this pocket of light or heat confronting the darkness and the ignorance and the secrecy and the censorship. It's a perfect metaphor for what we're doing here. We are conspiring in that sense. It just means breathe together, right? Echo Charlie says, William Shatner believes in climate disaster. He purports to. I think William Shatner is probably not who we think he is whatsoever. I mean, I think he's a great guy, I'm sure. I think George Takei would disagree. But the fact that he's been to space means that he's been to fake space. The fact that he's been to fake space means that he knows that his entire role has been a farce. I mean, I often posited the question, who's a better astronaut, William Shatner or Buzz Aldrin? If space travel is nothing more than pretending to be an astronaut on TV. Well, I think you could argue that William Shatner is a better astronaut. He's done it more. But who's a better actor? I'm going to go with Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin because they have kept the role up for decades. But no, he's an insider. And as an insider, he would know climate catastrophe is a hoax to convince people that they shouldn't own property. He knows it's a big communist hoax, communitarian hoax, communist hoax, whatever you want to call it. I mean, it's just this hive mind that we're all being converted into. Now, I have a ton of information, new information to go through regarding, of all things, 9/11, The Shining, and Stephen King. Let me go ahead and bring this up really quick. This is intriguing. I think Violet posted this in Gilded, a reference to a movie called Doctor Sleep. Doctor Sleep is a sequel to The Shining. Now, the interesting thing about it is this. Doctor Sleep 2019, supernatural horror film, a sequel to Stanley Kubrick's, based on Stephen King's 2013 novel of the same name. Now, before I say anything else, I want to say this. The movie The Shining is known for having a lot of hints that Kubrick had involvement in Apollo 11, but I think it's more interesting and relevant here that it has predictive programming for 9/11. The Shining predicts 9/11 in many ways, which we'll talk about here shortly. But now, this is what's interesting. Stephen King's sequel to The Shining is about a, quote, Abra Stone, a baby girl born in 2001, who manifests psychic powers and seemingly predicts the 9/11 attacks. So you have a baby that predicts 9/11, born in 2001, in this book. That's a sequel to The Shining, which was about or contained predictive programming for the 9/11 attacks. Fascinating connection there, because this is correlating 9/11 with The Shining, which has never been done outside of conspiracy theory conjecture. But now Stephen King has actually kind of cemented his brand here. That yes, The Shining is definitely some kind of Psywar operation. The movies are there to entertain you, sure, but programming is their real function. It all serves a programming function. Thank you, AGA DA8ME737. We appreciate the support. Spirit Jordan says the girl's full name is Abracadabra. You got to be kidding me. Okay, the girl in the book Doctor Sleep, Abra Stone, is Abracadabra. Now, abracadabra is the key word or the master word, according to Aleister Crowley, of the New Age. The Halloween store, where Musk got his Devil's Avenger red suit of armor with the upside down crosses and Ares ram's head, came from a store called Abracadabra. But yeah, here's the thing. This psychic child witnesses something, and it turns out that this story contains an adrenochrome type subtext where children are being harvested for their, quote, shining. But yeah, again, in the meantime, Abra Stone, a baby girl born in 2001, begins to manifest psychic powers when she predicts 9/11. Echo Charlie says, Tim, that was amazing on the Kubrick stare. Cannot unsee that. Oh yes, Donald Trump's Kubrick stare. And I have more pointing to Kubrick's role in directing Trump's incoming headshot. And it is coming. There is something there. And you look, I'm not saying it's going to be real. Nothing is. And I'm not going to make an exception for something that hasn't happened yet. Like, this might be real. But there is something building for it. Do you all recall the play in 2017, Julius Caesar, featuring Trump getting assassinated? Like, they've been doing this for a long time. And again, what I said, you cannot separate news from entertainment, from theater, from politics, from celebrity drama. It's all Psywar. Everything's staged. All reality TV shows are staged, and obviously so. And I almost think that reality TV was put there to conceal the fact that all TV is reality TV. It's all curated in the same way. Now let me play this clip here from Inside Edition. Staging of Trump's Julius Caesar features Trump getting assassinated.
It's an actor dressed to look just like President Donald Trump as he's assassinated on stage. Look as his character is stabbed to death. And there's no mistaking the Trump connection. Check out the unbuttoned overcoat and red tie that hangs over his waist. It's a staging of Shakespeare's Julius Caesar that is outraging many. The controversial production is taking place here in New York City's Central Park. The staging is being seen as a direct jab at Trump and the controversial political climate in this country. There are other similarities to Trump. Caesar's wife, Calpurnia, bears a resemblance to First Lady Melania.
No, it's just a coincidence. Let's play their game. Oh, the fact that it looks like Trump and Melania, and that they all threatened to kill Trump. Madonna wanted to blow up the White House. Kathy Griffin wants to chop off his head. Snoop Dogg shot him in a video. Despite all of this, and do you remember that track by, I think it was Mac Miller, F. Donald Trump? Is that the guy? The F. Donald Trump song. The album cover had Trump with like an X over an I. So they're building up this icon, which they're going to obviously take down. But they will say this is a coincidence. They will play it down all the time. But it's basically the death of Trump as Caesar. It's a bloody play. This was actually protested by Laura Loomer and Jack Pizzagate Posobiec. Laura Loomer actually got on the stage and interrupted this thing.
Caesar, his white dress shirt soaked in blood. There was mixed reaction about this new twist.
I didn't like that they...
Now, you want to say all these Democrats are bloodthirsty, they want to fantasize about killing Bush, killing Trump. Yeah, that's true. But you can no longer say that the bloodthirst is partisan. Like, both sides are bloodthirsty. Okay, let's see what else. We were talking about Dr. Sleep and how it has predictive programming for 9/11. So let me go ahead and run through one of my favorite content creators on this topic, which is Chartword. And he's just put out a few articles. He's on Twitter. I've seen him there. I've never directly interacted with him, but I want to write to him and interview him at some point because of what he's come up with here. So here's the article: Stanley Kubrick's faked death in the 9/11 hoax. So without getting into too much of this Stanley Kubrick's fake death stuff, I want to point out The Shining. He mentions Jay Weidner started the conspiratorial ball rolling with his article on The Shining. This expands on that line of thinking by deconstructing Eyes Wide Shut, Full Metal Jacket, and The Shining. But here's what he's showing, is that all these movies are interconnected and they're all predicting the same things. But listen to this. Now, actually, we already heard about this previously, but the twins, the twins in The Shining were not originally twins in Stephen King's book. This was an alteration, but this was because this was meant to associate them with the Twin Towers. It was Kubrick's decision to make them identical twins. When the audience first sees the twins, and the backstory is the previous caretaker of the hotel killed his daughters, and these are the ghosts. When the audience first sees the twins, they're standing next to each other like the Twin Towers. Danny is on his big wheel, speeding towards them. Now, when he's psychic, and so Danny's able to see them dead on the ground, chopped up with the axe after he passes. And the way that they're on the ground, the twins, with their axe wounds and the fireman's axe and the upturned chair, it looks like Ground Zero, just automatically. But next you have the scene where he's throwing darts, which the author here connects with projectiles and planes. And here you have the twins, and adjacent to the twins is the Bell telephone phone booth. Next to the Twin Towers is the Bell telephone tower. Now, what's more, you have the monolith. It's at the 9/11 site, a hotel specifically designed to resemble the 2001 monolith. It's called the Millennium Hilton. So here you have the Millennium Hilton overlooking Ground Zero. And this goes back to Space Odyssey 2001, a very Ground Zero-like scene. There's even a scene in Space Odyssey where a space plane is flying into the twin-wheeled space station, and it looks like a plane going into the Twin Towers. Dr. Strangelove has references to a jet airplane on a rogue low-flying attack mission, which seems to be predictive programming for the Pentagon attack. But these are just a few cherry-picked examples of the predictive programming in The Shining and a few of other Kubrick's works that reference 9/11 by mainly the architecture, the ground zero being represented here. It gets even a little more interesting when you go into the symbolism and even like the logos, for example. The Hilton logo, and again, that's a Hilton hotel designed to look like Kubrick, so that's a direct Kubrick reference at ground zero. Look at the Hilton logo and tell me it doesn't look like Twin Towers with the plane's flight path going into it. The impact zones are there in white. Not a coincidence. So again, my point being, if we can find copious predictive programming for 9/11 in the works of Kubrick, and in The Shining in particular, and then The Shining Part 2 comes out, and it stars a character who predicts 9/11, and that's out of Stephen King's pen, so that's not even hidden, that's not inferred, it's just directly in the plot. What do you make of that? Again, thanks to Violet for that lead. That's Doctor Sleep, which I'm probably going to watch. I read a bit about it, and it seems there's a couple of things. One, it grossed 7.32 million. So instantly there, you're like, oh, 732, 237, room 237, the movie that decodes The Shining, the distance, hundreds of thousands of miles to the moon. Okay, following the events of The Shining, the owners of the Overlook remain psychologically traumatized. Abra Stone begins to manifest psychic powers. She predicts the 9/11 attacks. There's much in here, though, about this steam, they call it, the adrenochrome, whatever they're feeding off of the psychic children. I think there's even a point in here where they talk about a child being tortured to death. Not my kind of movie, but very typical. And it seems like so many of these movies have this bizarre subtext that has to do with some kind of, I don't know what you want to call it, soul harvesting. Echo Charlie says, I never heard of Doctor Sleep. I hadn't either. But it's fascinating just how it connects to the subtext of the movie based on his first book. And Stephen King is a major influencer. If you look at his work in general, it's pretty much all anti-capitalism. Truckers are the bad guys. Capitalism revolts in the form of our appliances killing us in maximum overdrive. People under the stairs, rich people oppressing the poor under the stairs, and then there's a revolution when LL Cool J breaks in, and then the money shoots out the chimney, and all the poor people get the money. I mean, all these movies that Stephen King puts out are coming from a hardline leftist communist revolutionary attitude and perspective. He's always ripping on middle America, stereotyping rednecks, for example, or stereotyping poor whites in very negative ways. That's been his shtick from day one. He's always been an enemy of the people. But whether he's in on all the secrets, I couldn't say. But I think these authors at that level are probably linked to the monolith in some way. And the monolith that we see at Ground Zero, the monolith of Stanley Kubrick, it represents the movie screen, your screened reality. It's a symbol. Your iPhone. When they finish curating it and censoring it, it will be the monolith, the one stone. It'll be the new monotheism, which it practically already is. They just got to scrub the non-canonical, apocryphal, and bannable texts. Got to silence all of the heretics. Donald J. Trump truthed this: America is becoming a banana republic. That's what happens when you indict your political opponents. These are dark days in the life of America. And he posted with it an image of the Banana Republic. Now, I don't know if he did this or one of his aides did it, but this is what I got, Banana Republic. And I think it's kind of ominous because if you look inside of the Banana Republic, which is a clothing store, I just see a bunch of headless mannequins. Dark days for America, headless mannequins. I'm just detecting a little bit of stochastic violence there. Maybe even predictive programming. We'll see. There was a shooting in a dollar store, basically a really cheap dollar store psyop, hardly worth reporting on, but it's been amplified because it's white on black, and it's just another Kyle Rittenhouse clone. It's probably why they only had him shoot 3. Jumpers at UNC Chapel Hill jumping out of the building after reports of an active shooter. Just more fuel for their martyr cult. Now, let me read this. We talk about Trump and this predictive programming. Alex Jones is in on it. Since 2016, he has been talking about how they're going to take him out. They're going to take him out. Jones has been really hyping this for some time. But this is Alex Jones talking about how Trump is not even human.
Diamonds with
That Trump is not even fully human, or he's more than human. That he's transcended this realm. That he's some kind of godly being. Let me play this excerpt from InfoWars.
you riding like the one-eyed Jack of Diamonds with the devil close behind. He's not one-eyed. He's got one eye on earth, one eye into heaven. He's already not of the earth completely. He's already transcended his body.
Wait, one eye on earth, one eye on the heavens. Like, how do you do that? You turn your head sideways? You'd have to be very, you'd have to have some real peripheral vision there. But let me play on. Just ignore the fact that he sounds a little slurred.
The one-eyed man in the land of the blind is king. And if Trump's anything, he's a one-eyed man. And if Trump's anything, he's a one-eyed man.
Okay, now he's a one-eyed man. That's the main point there I wanted to bring up. The one-eyed man. Because the idea of the shooting, the headshot, it all involves the one eye symbol, the one eye Antichrist motif that we're kind of looking at here. So he put it out there, one-eyed man, one-eyed man. What the hell does that actually mean? Now, when we go into the predictive programming, etc., you got here's the song F Donald Trump. There's a couple of them. This one is with Nipsey Hussle, a protest song. I alluded to this earlier, and other than here we go. This is one of the few songs I've heard from Nipsey, outside of what we heard from that one album that he released on the Solstice. I didn't know he was on this one. Single by YG and Nipsey Hussle. It's interesting because Nipsey Hussle is the rapper who was killed at 33 after carrying his son cross to the front of his store. He was shot between his two friends who were convicts, like Jesus between two thieves. The entire Nipsey Hussle death scenario was a setup. He was portrayed as a Osiris. Laura London was Isis. They had all kinds of Christification that went into Nipsey Hussle. So it's interesting that he's on this track. And if you look here, the F Donald Trump track, it has Trump with one eye X'd out. This track was recorded in an hour and was inspired by Hussle's positive experience of working with Mexican immigrants. There you go, boom. Going through some psyops. Evolvement says a cheap psyop. Oh yeah, it's a dollar store psyop. Dollar General. No witnesses, no blood, no marches, no signage, no t-shirts with the victims' faces. No, it was just like your nightly outrage. Then you just move on tomorrow. And they like doing this. Because if they can do 50 or 60 outrages like this a year, you can't keep up. It overwhelms you. And that's what they're doing with the sea of misinformation, malinformation. It's actually misinfo. The general public is misinformed. We are informed. The mass media are also misinformed, but they're also the appointed misinformers. Like, I don't think they're in the know necessarily. It's on a need-to-know basis. Jones, because of his position and where he is, I assume he knows mostly everything about the fakeness of the world stage, except for space. He seems to believe in space. And things are that compartmentalized, where he may not be in the know about space, or because he knows astronauts. He's had Buzz Aldrin on. He's talked to astronauts. So it's possible that he knows it's fake, or he's been given a story that he found plausible. Like, hey, Alex Jones, it's real, but we're using super high-tech flying saucers, and we're trying to hide that. So we're just going to give him this BS space shuttle stuff and just go with that. But it's way more sophisticated, and space is way realer than you know. And he's like, wow, mind blown. And he goes along with it, thinking that space is real, but the way they represent it is fake for tactical and strategic reasons. Most people think that. For example, Jim Fetzer did a really good book debunking the moon landings, but he believes that there's a secret space program. Well, I don't believe in secret things that we can't see or touch or test. Tominoid says, One-Eyed Jacks, 1961, Stanley Kubrick, for unknown reasons, stepped down from directing the film 2 weeks before it began production. Yeah, Kubrick's a very fascinating character in all of this. And have any of you heard any of these pathetic, weak arguments from various NASAtologists that say it would have been easier to have gone to the moon in 1969 than to have faked it? It would be too hard to fake it, no way. A lot of them say that. There's arguments made, very passionate arguments, that no, you're dumb for thinking it could be faked, it's impossible. They're trying to argue that no, moon landings were not fakeable. And that's insane, because anything, and if you look at the screen, these are some examples. I think NASA spent in 1960 something, they spent like $2 million on this moon model. It's a realistic moon model. The would-be astronaut would sit in the cockpit simulator, and they would see the cratered lunar surface, and it'd be on a revolving conveyor belt. And this was to simulate landing on the moon. So they simulated it realistically. And my point being is that anything that can be simulated with realistic models can be faked on camera. It's that simple. So it's fakeable. And anything that can be faked in the movies can be faked in the news. It's just a matter of labeling it properly. Like before the latest Artemis mission, NASA had an animation for the Artemis rocket and its thing going to the moon. And they had to put a notice on there, animation, animation. I'm like, why are they telling us it's an animation? Well, because the general public wouldn't be able to distinguish between the animation and the quote real thing, which hadn't happened yet. So they didn't want people to think it had already happened by looking at the animation. So they had to tell them, oh, it hasn't happened yet. We are a reality impaired society. But again, anything that can be simulated with realistic models can be faked on camera, therefore can be faked in the movies, therefore can be faked on the news. They put it in the movies so that when they present it on the news, it seems believable. The movies are there to set your expectations. The movie sets your frame of reference. You could extend that to the TV, to the screen. That's what I mean when I bring up the monolith and why it's so relevant and pertinent to this and the moon fakery and 9/11 and Ground Zero, because the monolith represents that one screen that filters all of our perceptions, and Kubrick's monolith represents the screen in its dimensions. And if everybody's operating from that same frame of reference, everybody can be controlled in the same way. Jay Digg says Bart Sibrel has the same theories about a secret space program. See, Bart Sibrel is the guy who's known for debunking the moon. He got punched in the face by an astronaut. So if anybody would know, it's him. Oh, he's a true skeptic, right? Nope, he believes in secret spacecraft like we've never seen. So he replaced the stuff that we're supposed to believe, which is debunkable, for something that is not believable. And this is this is classic. Do you remember when I said that the general public is right up nose against the screen and they believe what they see? And the people who dig deeper step through the screen into dream worlds? Bart Sibrel is in a dream world. He said, oh, that screen, that's showing me something fake. I'm going to dig deeper. He steps through the screen into, now I believe in aliens and secret space and anti-gravitation things and flying saucers. How did that happen? It's because instead of rejecting the screen and stepping back, instead of taking the subtractive view of the auto hoaxer and including fakeability in his assessment, he stepped forward. And I call that MSM plus. You go with the screen and you add, oh, there's a fire in Hawaii. Let me step through the screen because there's more to it. Oh, it was space lasers. And now there's missing children. What a scary world we live in. I'm going to go cry about it on TikTok. See, you entered a nightmare and it upset your feelings. I, on the other hand, and my friends, we're all like, no, look who's presenting this, and it's a screen. Remember, it's a filter, it's not a window. So we step back and we say, let's look at the facts. Couldn't find any. It's always like that. I'm not in their dream world. When I say that the auto hoaxer perspective represents the only legitimate objectivists in the world, the only legitimate form of objectivism, like I'm 100% serious. The objectivist society is a cult of NASAtologists. Doesn't matter if they can be objective about everything else. Their frame of reference goes through that same screen. They're mind controlled. Infinite Muse says the whole "we lost the technology" should say it's all a joke. Yes. And when it comes to the space program, and we're going to do a cyber symposium in September on the space station, I have a plan. My plan is to take this think tank and just literally just shoot it out of the sky figuratively. And we're going to do that. We're going to bring down the ISS in the minds of the believers. It all just does seem like a bad joke. But most of what will bring it down is not what they show you, which is like a magic show. If you're sitting in the chair and you're looking at the stage, you can't debunk it from your perspective. That's how optical illusions work. And I think when it comes to things like the space program in general, we have to remember that that's a very curated view. What's going to give it away as a hoax is that which they don't show you, but should be there. And I think there's a number of holes in their story that I want to present in a more organized context. And I think this is devastating stuff. And I am going to be using our conference room here to invite subject matter experts. I have a couple of video editing experts who are going to offer their expert opinion. And you're going to see that if somebody's told, this is like an experiment, honestly. If you tell a professional video editor that you need some help determining whether something's real or fake, and you give them a few clips, they will tell you unerringly which one is real, which one is fake, because you're paying them. Yet, if you tell them in advance, hey, will you tell me if these are real or fake? These ones are from NASA. They won't even process the NASA stuff as anything other than real. It's about context and frame of reference. And they have managed to get people to look at NASA and the news media itself as just 100% authoritative. No questions. And Bart Sibrel, therefore, with his "something funny happened on the way to the moon," was just doing damage control. Classic guardrail. It's like, oh, if anybody knows it's him, let's interview him. Well, no, that's someone who is, look, and he's one of two things. One, he's an insulated dupe, or two, he's one of them. One or the other. And if he's one of them, well, you know what that means. He's basically just a soulless crisis actor. If he's not one of them, and he's a dupe, then he's not a leader, one. And then two, if he's confronted with the truth and rejects it, then you make your assessment as to what you're dealing with. Jay Diggs says you could say Mick West. Oh, yeah, let me bring that up too. Mick West is a good example. Metabunk. So Mick West can debunk UFOs all day. He can look at photographs and say, oh, that's fake. This is fakeable. He'll recognize it's fakeable. But then will he turn that same level of critical inquiry to the ISS or Starlink or Mousegate? No, it shuts off. So the question is there some kind of internal thought cop that's been implanted? Or is it just money? Is there some incentive? Or are some of these people lying to themselves on a level that they don't even know? Like, I'm not sure, because I don't lie to myself. I don't 2 + 2 = 5 myself just to blend in with the crowd. You know, like the Emperor's New Clothes thing, where everybody says they see clothes, so I'm going to go along with it because I don't want to be outgrouped. It's like, well, yeah, please outgroup me. Off-world stage me. I'm not asking to breathe your air or to be included in your simulations. But they don't give us options. And I think that's one of the things that has galvanized this parallel media concept, is that 2020 displayed that they don't give you room to disagree. There's no opt-out. No, they pay you. They give you a stimmy. There's no opt-out from the mind control. And the best they can do is appease you with a small check so you can pay for Netflix or whatever. All right, let's go through your comments. Linda Curtis says they may have blinded them with science, but will awaken them with logic. Yes, definitely. There's a word that I use, scientism, to denote when someone's concept of what science is really been relegated to believing state-appointed scientists instead of knowing what's true based on the data. Huge difference. Fundamental difference. Like the idea of settled science has a corollary with settled media. And people think, oh, if it was debunked, it would have been exposed. Or they believe 100% of the news they didn't watch. They just assume, oh, if it was fake, somebody would have called it out. No, that's actually never the case. Again, if you just got here, the AutoHoaxology 101 texts have arrived. I'm going to make a few slight changes, but these initial orders finance the whole production, and I needed these as background, as props, as content for the interviewers to look over, because this is going to be the basis of our discussions. And even before I had any interested media in what we're doing contacting me, I was already preparing the interviews. Like I said earlier, just by coincidence, I was already working on a video project where I was writing interview questions and preparing my answers. And I was working with local reporters, and we were going to start production early September or this week, depending on where I was at. And now we have this company from, or this news agency that's going to be over here in the office, and I have these physical copies, which will be signed and sent out immediately after. I do need to have them here just because these are going to be an important part of the discussion, and they need to see that this is indeed it's a cult. It's scalable. The fact that it has a quote, a Bible, a book, a set of things that we all agree upon as far as our operating systems, this to me is one of the main reasons why I think it's important to have this conversation anyway, because I'm trying to dispel the idea that conspiracy theorists are confused or we're all in their dream world believing wacky things because we don't trust the screen. And I'm saying no, that's the polar opposite of us, to be honest. It's kind of interesting how it works, but you have to realize that the mainstream media's version of reality consists of conspiracy theories. But they don't call it that. They call it progressivism. They call it liberalism. But those are all conspiracy theory based. From climate change to mass shooters, these things are all fake. But the more extreme version of it goes deeper into the dream world. Like as I've been saying, they go deeper into it and they believe, and it's on the left and right, woke or red pill. The people who question the fundamental tend to go extreme. Extremely left, extremely right is both, if you ask me, these are both deeper levels of programming. That's why I called the book, the previous one, The World Stage Deprogramming Guide, because I think it's really about recognizing the existence of the stage. And the stage is that which comes into your mind through that screen. It's the general agreed upon stage or consensus worldview. Now, the conspiracy theorist label and all that stuff, we talk about this endlessly. They changed it to conspiracist and everything. But what I'm arguing for here is that what we represent is actually skepticism. True skepticism, suspension of judgment. And, from this perspective, I think we have the high ground, the moral and intellectual high ground when it comes to this, because it's not like there's no consequences for mindlessly believing and following along with this stuff. You may say, oh, you guys are just contrarian. You're doing it for the money. You're a conspiracist. Well, what are you? You're a blind faith believer in a system that believes in systematically traumatizing children with hyper-realistic school shooting drills for political purposes, to fill their worlds, to fill their worldview with shooters, with threats that don't exist. So who has the moral high ground? The ones who aid and abet the psychological torture of children, or us? I think we're doing better on that level. When it comes to intellectual high ground, Well, the people who don't know how media works, the people who operate out of ignorance or consensus trance, aren't using their minds. They're being led by their emotions, so they lose there as well. Yeah, phones are open. The number's on the screen. It is 505 349 0420. I haven't sent out live stream notifications. This wasn't exactly planned, but the books came in and I had to drop them off here at the studio at the headquarters, and I realized, you know what, this is probably, I got to bring this up too. They asked me if I can bring other people. They want to talk to others as well. So if you're in the Albuquerque area, or you can be by September the 4th, then by all means get in touch. The address is public, it's easy to find, but I'm going to arrange something. Like, in other words, we're going to have the first IPS headquarters meetup. And I realize it's on short notice and can't expect very many to show. Although on that day we will be doing a live stream, probably around the same time. And it will be filmed by the news company, and they're going to, because they want to observe how we operate. Okay, IPS HQ Meetup 9/4/2023. Big newspaper out of Europe is doing a story on people who make a living spreading conspiracy theories. I won't name them now. Too many of my haters can aggressively sabotage, etc. But here's what they said. They would like to talk to others as well and ask that I invite others. So if you can make it here on 9/4 or know someone who would, let them know. The crew will be here from 9 to 9. We're going to work out a few more details on locations, but we're going to meet at the IPS headquarters. This will be the opportunity we need to launch the Autohoaxology 101 text, and the publicity overall will boost our visibility, which will help us get back to and exceed our previous numbers. And then, most importantly, I think we're going to launch the tabloid and activate the reporters. So what I'm doing with the reporters, and I haven't been too explicit with any of this because sabotage, we have to, just operational security, but we're using the reporters to distribute a free version, an abbreviated version of the tabloid, a promo version. So if you're a press pass carrying reporter and you want to be a distribution node, all you have to do is let me know. And when I order the big batch, I'm going to be sending them all over the place to whoever wants to distribute these. And in order to make it cost effective, these ones are going to be smaller, and they're going to contain teasers for every article with QR codes to see it online or order the full version. So I'm operating off of the freemium version. So instead of trying to build subscribers, which would only be an echo chamber, because there's the only people who would know about it are people like you and I. But when we distribute it through or in lieu of, or possibly even with business cards, if we distribute this, it becomes the calling card. And we will work out formal distribution at various newspaper outlets, comic shops, or wherever, dispensaries. But my point is, a lot of places are open to free monthly or weekly papers, and I have a few ideas for how to implement this, but specifically this will be done through our press pass carrying reporters. You'll see in the first copies that come out the utility of it all, and we're going to use it to build the network, to build the infinite parallel media. And I say parallel because we're not anti-media, we exist with it. It's like you can't just be against it and think you can bury your head in the sand. It's part of our environment, and part of situational awareness is knowing what everyone is brainwashed to think, to feel, how they're brainwashed to react. I like to know the playing field. Got a support here from, thank you very much, Frederick. Appreciate the support. Let's see if there's any notes on it. He says, cheers. All right, well, hey, thanks for this again, because this is all going into setting the stage for Monday. And the reason we're doing this isn't to be accepted in the mainstream. The reason we're doing this isn't to curry favor. It's because we need to exist in the meat-verse as much as we exist in the metaverse. And as of this particular publication, we will exist because they've managed to blacklist us, to block us, to censor us. How many dozens of channels did they burn? Books, they've banned books. In fact, I was actually selling that flat earth activist book a while back, and it was literally paying my rent for like months and months. It was actually selling pretty well. But then one day, I got this notice from Amazon, and they said, it has too many spelling errors you need to fix before we can put it back in circulation. And the spelling errors were words that we made up, like glober, globe exit, flat smack, for example. So I'm just saying, it was a targeted hit, and they've always done this. And so this is like an opportunity to kind of get back to where the platform should have been from the very get-go. And I have a million ideas here. I mean, it's this whole tabloid, South Park, all of our projects. We have so many things that have been somewhat stultified. So we're kind of cracking that dam. Yes, Europe too. If you have a press pass spirit, we want press pass carriers everywhere, and I want to distribute this thing everywhere. In fact, the printer is in the UK. T-Dog135 says Alex Jones said the only way to save yourself from breathing in the variant is to wear a spacesuit. Didn't I say this in 2020? I said PPE is conditioning you for a spacesuit. It's part of conditioning you that you cannot live in this world. You're alien to it. It's inimical to your survival and vice versa. And you have to wear a body condom to protect Mother Earth. And yep, that's what people are doing. The fact that Jones would say that means that Jones walked through the monolith. Okay, now, in Space Odyssey 2001, David Bowman merges with the monolith. What does that all mean? I think the movie was about our new age, the space age. And the space age isn't about when we go to these other planets. The space age is about their control of our inner space, our minds. And so the idea of merging with the monolith to me is quite literally taking their screen at face value, or worse, like Alex Jones, walking through it, entering the dream world. And it's not just the conspiracy theorists in the dream world. It's the far left. It's the Antifas. It's the radical fringes on both sides of the political horseshoe. Red pill and woke. They're essentially in the same boat, or identical. They're in identical predicaments. And what do they do at that point? When they get into the matrix that deep, they look around and they say, well, this is the real world. And this is the false awakening. So the red pill false awakening has them thinking, we're in the real world. No one else goes deep enough. They're up to the screen, but they didn't go all the way through. And so they want to pull people through, thinking that they're dragging them in out of the matrix. Like Alex Jones is pulling people out of the matrix. No, he's pulling you in deeper. He's dragging you in deeper, into a deeper level of mind control, where now your obsession is red versus blue, a false dialectic. Oh, those blue people are asleep. I'm awake. Well, no, they're dreaming, and they're having a lovely time, and they resent your attempts to awaken them. You are having a nightmare, and you're trying to get them to join you in your nightmare because you feel like the nightmare is real. And I'm saying that the dream is fake, and the nightmare version is on the fringe to keep you from leaving altogether. Spirit Jordak says the Apple TV show Invasion uses David Bowie music and poster. David Bowie, Space Oddity. It parallels Space Odyssey. He's the Starman, man who fell to Earth. He's, again, correlating with David Bowman. David Bowie's a stage name. David Bowie, David Bowman. There's some dispute as to the origin of the name David Bowie, but I think they don't want to be too obvious. Because everything about David Bowie's career has a direct correlation to our paradigm shift into the space age. Even Elon Musk sending the Tesla Roadster into space with a David Bowie effigy in it, with a David Bowie song playing, Starman. Yeah, that was representing this collective immersion into this dream world. Okay, continuing. Salty says, dream or nightmare, it doesn't matter, you're still asleep. Yeah, the red pill is a false awakening, and the woke is a false awakening. Each of these are alternative perspectives of the world stage, catering to the fringe left and the fringe right. And what's also notable about this is that the woke sees the fringe right as their main enemy, and they see the dreamers as ignorant people who need to wake up. The other side of the stage, the red pill, their focus is on the woke, the fringe left. So what happens is the fringes go into the deeper level of programming. Everything's more intense, more immediate, more apocalyptic, and they face the center. And they're staring at each other across the vast field of blue pill brainwashees, and they're competing. Who can drag in the most to their fringe? It's like that game, Hungry Hungry Hippos. Like they're all just hungrily just trying to grab these people and drag them into their nightmare. And these are all false awakenings. The only truth is to be found in objectivity, which doesn't exist on the world stage, left or right. There's some levels of it, but it disappears at certain points when you reach your level of security clearance. And if you look at this lie world order structure as a pyramid, the masses on the bottom, yeah, we're mostly just beliefs, but every level up, you know a little more about how the world works. And it's probably a huge ego boost for a lot of these sellouts to get elevated a little bit. Oh, so you know now that FEMA fakes things for political control. Wow. And that's like enough for some people. They think that they're elite now. It's like, well, you don't know that they fake space or that viruses are, you know, the whole thing. Levels, depending on need to know basis. You can't let one person know it all, or people at different levels. It might conflict with their programming or their morals. Like, for example, I think that Neil deGrasse Tyson is a dupe. I don't think he's a liar. He's lying, but he's an unwitting, honest liar. I don't think he's dishonest about it at all. I think his heart's in the right place. But as they say, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. And I think that if he knew it was all fake, he wouldn't be so convincing. He wouldn't be able to passionately defend his BS if he didn't really believe it. By the way, there will be a massive test of the emergency alert system on 10/4. All TVs, all radios, all mobile phones. Now, a lot of the QAnoners are going to be really happy about this because they think that they're going to get to watch 10 days nonstop Democrats getting decapitated by Donald Trump's white hat army. That's what they think. They've been praying to JFK for some kind of emergency alert where we find out the truth about everything on TV and no one can deny it. They've been waiting for this message for a long time. And it makes me think about the biblical promise of an apocalypse where, yeah, at some point, God's going to show himself and everything's going to be revealed. And then your life won't suck anymore. Just more hopium. So they're actually, but my point of it is this. How sick is it that they hope that this emergency alert is for something real that changes the world? They're hoping for an emergency. It's doom hope. I'm not in the state of doom hope. I'm not hoping for an end. Okay, we talked a little bit about Stanley Kubrick's book, rather his movie, The Shining, and Stephen King's book, Dr. Sleep, a follow-up to The Shining, about a girl born in 2001 who, as a baby, predicts 9/11. Very interesting. Again, it's interesting simply because the movie The Shining happens to predict 9/11 in many different scenes. Spirit Jordic says, in Back to the Future, the clock stopped at 10:04. Okay, yeah, 10:04. There you go. There's probably a million reasons why it's a very significant date. It's going to be another one of those days. Although 9/23 is first. 9/23 is the next big date. It's been a doomsday since 2016, 2017. Hasn't happened yet. Anytime somebody tells me that the world's going to end, I ask them to just lend me their car, and they never do. Let me play this clip.
Next thing you know, all people just dropping out the building. I counted like at least 33 people dropping from just this side of the building. I can imagine what happened on the other side. And I'm just glad that none of my family in there. That's what I know.
Are you fucking still on or what?
Now, if you didn't catch that, this 9/11 witness saw 33 jumpers.
Next thing you know, all people just dropping out the building. I counted like at least 33 people dropping.
I counted 33. Interesting. Now, it's just a coincidence, as you all know. These are all coincidences. You know, it's a coincidence that Buzz Aldrin got paid $33 to go to the moon. He was reimbursed 33. It's a coincidence that they all wear the X-33 watch. It's another coincidence. Mach 33, yeah, coincidence. I get a lot of flack for pointing that one out, and they're like, you just made that number up. I show them the number, and they're like, no, they went Mach 22.596. Like, I think you're missing the point here. And I can't tell if they're being deliberately obtuse or if it's just the programming is that powerful. And if it is, then we're dealing with a lot of mind control victims. I saw this very heartwarming video here. So a lot of people are convoying to go to Burning Man for that orgy in the desert where there's no showers with a bunch of sweaty leftists. It's basically like the right-wing version of the Bohemian Grove, but it's out in the desert, the Burning Man. They do it at Black Rock City, very significant name. Burning Man, Phoenix, Black Rock, 33 consecutive Burning Mans ending in 2020. Fascinating story. At the final Burning Man of that sequence up until 2019, before they paused, a 33-year-old was found dead at Black Rock City. Again, 33rd Burning Man, 33-year-old found dead in Black Rock City. And then it goes on. It goes on. You can correlate this to the Black Monday market crashes of 87 and 2016. It's all symbolism. It's all telling stories in advance. Just like in 2019, there was a 33-year-old who set himself on fire in front of the White House with the USA shirt. It was caught on TMZ. A guy with a USA shirt on fire. And this was the same year as a guy died in Black Rock City, months apart. And what's more, 33 years before the 2019 incineration of that man, the year of the first Burning Man festival, a Burning Man happened. A man set himself on fire in front of the Reagan White House, and it was another 33-year-old. Again, believe it or not, but there were two 33-year-olds, 33 years apart, 86 and 2019, that set themselves on fire at the ellipse. You have the Burning Man festivals starting in 86, running till 2019, bookended the very end by a 33-year-old mysteriously turning up dead. And then 87 and 2020, you had these 33 years spaced apart Black Monday market crashes. And what I found here is that there's a correlation between the market crash, Black Rock City, where the Burning Man happens, and the number 33. Fascinatingly, on 3/16/2020, when season 2 of Black Monday, a TV show, started, that's when the market crash happened. Well, Black Monday is a TV series about the 1987 crash. So on the season 2 of that series, we actually lived through the second Black Monday crash. It's sort of a 9/11ing of the economy. The Dow Jones Industrial went down 3,000 points, a very 9/11ing number. Yesterday was the 68th anniversary of Emmett Till's death. He was lynched, and that kicked off the civil rights, which came back. The whole thing kind of was reinvigorated by the death of Trayvon Martin. But this is an interesting one because he was lynched because of a proto-Karen. A Carolyn Dunham went Karen on him for hitting on her or saying something about her appearance, and he was supposedly tortured and killed. Now, I've seen the photo of him in his coffin because the family said people need to see this to affect social change. So his face, this martyr, Emmett Till, is what really galvanized the civil rights movement. The thing is, it looked fake. I'm just saying, it looked fake. My point of it is, we're looking at martyrs, though. So here we are 68 years later, and this is being brought up again because of present events. And then just yesterday they had that Dollar General shooting, which was done by a white supremacist, according to the police chief who read all of his manifestos. So they love to bring out these martyrs and then associate them with the present day. And I was just listening to a Daily Beast podcast, and they're very upset that people have put Martin Luther King next to Donald Trump. So you have MLK, Emmett Till, then you have Martin Luther King and Trump. What does Trump have to do with any of it? Well, on the 55th anniversary of MLK's assassination, Trump was arraigned on 4/4, And he has since been compared to Moses by the Magas. And the Make America Great Again, well, MAGA is the promised land when America's made great again. Just part of the association here. My point is, they take these martyrs and they associate them, and it brings these emotions, it brings these stories into the conversation. Super disingenuous. Here's a quote from Aldous Huxley I found interesting. There will be in the next generation or so a pharmacological method. Now, before I go further here, well, we'll just read it all the way through. Because Aldous Huxley, Brave New World, we're talking about the sea of irrelevance, and he's the one who coined that phrase. There will be many in the next generation or so, or there will be in the next generation, a method for making people love their servitude and producing dictatorship without tears, producing a kind of painless concentration camp for entire societies. So people will have their liberties taken away, but will enjoy it. Doesn't this just sound 100% like the movie The Village, where the communists born into the commune don't know? They don't realize that it's not the 19th century, that they're being kept back 100 years, that they're isolated and quarantined. No, they love it. They sing the songs, they're part of their community, they're happy. What Huxley goes on to say is, they will be distracted from any desire to rebel by the propaganda and the brainwashing enhanced by pharmacological methods. This is the final revolution. And I would say it succeeded. That with the advent of the nuclear bomb, 1946, they managed to put such an egregious threat in all of our faces that it put mankind into a hostage situation, a circular firing squad, collective hostage situation. It redefined geopolitics, and what it also changed was the game board itself, to where because of this, they have the ultimate power to define our reality, because we accepted the premise that they have this power. It's like they introduced a God that we all suddenly believe in. But they have arrogated unto themselves that much power, and we gave it to them. And I would say this was a revolution, because what they did with the nuke in 1946 with the tests is when they split the atom or whatever, you know what they really did is they obliterated reality. All of it. Objective reality was obliterated, and we were moved into the dream world. That was a revolution against the mind, against cognition. That's why I say we're in a state of philosophical crisis, but we've been born into it with a healthy dose of Stockholm Syndrome. All right, going through your comments here. Yes, Infant Muse says COVID-33 will be a real doozy. Yeah, I'd like to think that we wouldn't fall for something or people wouldn't go along with it, but we'll see. I'm of the opinion that disease X is Twitter. That the X represents what's coming next. And when Musk had the glowing cross on Twitter, that was a reference to Constantine and his desire to unite the empire under the sign of the cross. And right now, we are being united under this new religion, the monolithic religion. And its symbol is the cross, the X. And what Musk did with X is he put the dome over it, rate limitations, made it a closed system, and he talked about it being the everything app, like including everything, including finances. But the whole point of it is it's about consolidation. And that before we can have a perfect Bible for this new age, like Constantine and the idea of the Bible having to be curated and approved for a version, we're reaching that right now. And the new Bible, of course, is this monolith. It's this screened reality. But leading up to it, they have to go through this entire censorship agenda in order to perfect it. But that's what they're working on. And I think the way they're going to get the public to acquiesce to it is they're going to say, hey, look, because of what Musk did with X, he got rid of the block feature. He let the haters and the QAnons and the conspiracy theorists run wild. We broke the internet. So disease X is going to be some kind of internet crisis. And I'm not thinking it's going to be computer viruses. I'm thinking mind viruses. And you know what's also interesting about all of this? Think about the pandemic model, how you treat it. and the role of Bill Gates. So virus, quarantine, uh, the version of the vax has to be updated to deal with this particular virus. And then think about computer viruses. Same problem and the threat that they possibly represent. Now, you go back a little further, the Microsoft Word, the idea of Microsoft Word, word processor, it's just a word processor, but look at the inventor of it, Richard Brody. Richard Brody wrote the book Virus of the Mind, where he set the premise of mimetic engineering, or how you can catch ideas, you can catch a mind virus. His whole premise was that words are viruses. So I don't think it's a coincidence that Microsoft Word's creator wrote the book, really a seminal book on mind viruses, that sets the premise that memes are analogous to viruses, and we must exercise meme control. So this premise for thought control was actually established with the advent of the pseudoscience of memetics, and the fact that it was the guy behind Word is very pertinent. Microsoft Word, mind viruses. There's a strong correlation there, but it's intentional. This conflating of lingo for describing epidemiology and pandemics and describing political speech. They get people to accept things, ideas, and concepts in the entertainment, and then they implement it later. Jay Digg says, the movie Songbird came out at the end of 2020, took place in 2024, and the world was in lockdown for 2023. Yep, I recall that. Now, there's something someone said, the movie Stray, and I haven't watched it yet, some movie about talking dogs, but what was said in this comment was that there's a bit of graffiti in the background on one of the scenes that says it's a psyop, and it's on top of a mushroom cloud. So I interpret that as predictive in some way. And if you remember, the game Call of Duty said hoax. The virus is a hoax. Like these little clues, these little Easter eggs. So it just wouldn't surprise me at all, if the next thing on the agenda is using high altitude nukes, EMPs, blackouts, and fallout. I think fallout is the next lockdown excuse. I think they could make that happen faster than a virus, and it's not as partisan. You can't not believe in fallout. You might believe that your political opponents are behind it, but you're going to accept the threat. And there's a movie called The Humanity Bureau with Nicolas Cage about a future where mankind is locked down because of nuclear fallout. And what he finds out is he gets his hands on a Geiger counter, which is a banned item. It's contraband. You're not supposed to be able to test this stuff for yourself. And what he finds is that they were lying. The government lied in order to keep people locked down. This came out in 2017. So here you have, his name is Cross, and what he finds out is this. They evade the Bureau and make it to the nuclear power plant, which they were warned was highly irradiated. Their Geiger counter reveals there's no radiation. It was a scare tactic to keep people from fleeing to the north. So imagine that. Of course, this is science fiction, but imagine the government using fake nuclear fallout to lock down entire sections of the world. Obviously, it's science fiction. Who would fall for that? Infinite Muse says, you will own nothing and be happy is a powerful suggestion mantra. It's hypnosis. Yes. Yes, that is a key point there as well. I do believe in mind viruses, but I think they only exist for people that don't critically think. Like, I think you can catch ideas through osmosis, through apathy, through not willfully dismissing it, and they do become beliefs. And that's the premise of mind virus, or virus of the mind, is that you can have these idea constructs that do in fact spread analogous to a virus. But I think that only happens when you don't critically process it, which is what we're doing when we analyze the news. Virus of the Mind, New Science of the Meme, written by a computer programmer. Fascinating stuff. No, this is the one. No, Virus of the Mind was written by Dawkins. The one I'm thinking of is Let's see if I can find it. The one by with Richard Brody, but the guy who invented Word. Did he just coin the term? Virus of the Mind, Richard Brody carefully builds. Here it is. Memetics is the science of memes, the invisible but very real DNA of human society. Richard Brody is best known as the original author of Microsoft Word. The Virus of the Mind essay by Richard Dawkins. And I was reading The God Delusion by Richard Dawkins, and I stopped reading at about page 350. And I stopped reading because he dedicated a few pages to making an argument that it would be better to be abused by a priest than to be raised religious. No, it's better. Oh, he said that being abused wasn't as bad as being brought up with a religious belief system. He actually made the argument that, and he even alluded to his own experiences at his schools where he was brought up, where the priests were very abusive, but he minimized it. So I stopped reading his work because I'm like, I'm not going to listen to someone who's going to make these inhuman arguments just because he has vitriol for organized religion. Like, I have no love for organized mind control, but that level of argumentation or minimizing abuse like that just really struck me as kind of a strange and out of place. That's Richard Dawkins. If you haven't read The God Delusion, Jay Digg says Will Ferrell is the voice of the main dog in the movie. His name is Reggie. Reggie. Yeah, and Reggie means king, like Reggie Gray, hitting people in the heads in that Alabama fight. He's 42, like Rosa Parks, who had her own civil rights struggle 50 some years before over a chair. And I think that connects pretty well. Reggie Gray and the chair hitting on the head. I think that thematically ties in with a few things because Reggie means king, and it was the Rodney King beating, hit 33 times. I'm not sure if it's all on his head, but the Rodney King beating prompted the LA riots, which ended up with Reginald Denny getting hit in the head. Reginald Denny was 33. Rodney King hit 33 times. You can look this stuff up. It's very clear when these psyops are psyops. The number codes tend to give it away, and this fictional universe tends to integrate all of their stories together. I may watch the movie, though. I did watch They Cloned Tyrone with Jamie Foxx. We talked about the significance of Jamie Foxx with the BLM, with the bigger psychological warfare, the martyrdom cult, his own death and resurrection earlier this spring, rumors of his own cloning before a movie, Tyrone Got Cloned, came out with him in it. And I think the name Tyrone connects with Tyree Nichols and that psyop from earlier in the year, which was actually stylized to look like the Rodney King beating. They do reference and create this entire mythology. They do reference all of these older events and they bring them back up. In fact, I didn't show it yesterday, but I have an image I posted on my Twitter juxtaposing the Rodney King beating with the Tyree Nichols beating. And as you'll see, same director, or rather, it's a nod to the previous beating. It wasn't as savage, and I remember the news reporters at the time insisted that it was so violent, it was so brutal that you shouldn't watch it. That it's just like it's so shocking. So I watch it, and I'm like, this is not even a quarter as bad as the Rodney King beating. Like, they couldn't produce the same effect, but they wanted you to think so. They set your expectations. Some reporters even said that they got nauseous and threw up upon seeing it, that it was so bad. And we watched that video of Tyree Nichols' beating, and it looked like a hazing. It looked like slap boxing. It looked like WWE. It did not look like a real beating. All right, let's see here. We talked about the 10-4 emergency broadcast. We discussed the Dr. Sleep book, where Stephen King has a character predicting 9/11, the sequel to The Shining, which happens to, in the movie form at least, connect The Shining with 9/11. We talked a little bit about the symbolism in The Shining that connects to 9/11, as well as symbolism from Space Odyssey and the meaning of the monolith, which again, the monolith is the monolithic control over media. It's the capstone in the pyramid. It's the one perspective that everyone has to adopt, the all-seeing lens. It's Big Brother's viewfinder, if you want to look at it that way. Yep, U.S. government reimbursed Buzz Aldrin $33 for his trip to the moon in 1969. SpaceX conducts epic 33-engine Starship test. And they do wear X-33. It's the Mach 33 collection, or the X-33 watches. And then I showed images of the realistic model of the moon that NASA paid millions for in the 60s, which refutes the claim that they didn't have the technology to fake a moon landing. Because if you can fake it realistically with models on camera, you can fake it in the movies or on TV. Then you have this. Again, the make-believe moon landings were all rehearsed in realistic simulations and simulators. NASAtologists will say they couldn't have faked it in the 60s. Yeah, they could have. They did. Here it is. The Command Module Simulator was used at the Kennedy Space Center to train Apollo astronauts. This was used in conjunction with the Lunar Module Simulator. The simulated command module was patterned after the actual spacecraft. Now, this is very interesting. It says realism was maintained by simulating all aspects of the flight that they would encounter, including sounds, failures, fire, life support, and food prep. 3 simulation engineers conducted the training missions and had capacity to insert malfunctions to enhance training. So to me, this is a huge part of how they do PSYOPs, drills. The drill is just a rehearsal and a rehearsal. Because if you rehearse it enough, it makes it easier to lie. Because you can say something that's not true. Like I did a lie detector test. I was given a lie detector test when I was in basic training. The base I was at was adjacent to this FBI training center where they train students on the polygraph. And I got out of duty one day by volunteering to be a candidate in one of their studies. And I was given scripts to read about crimes I had committed or lies I was to tell. And so I'm strapped in a chair, and they have all these things hooked up to me, and there's a big window in front where I'm being observed. And they're reading what I was told is, lie detector tests are mostly just reading your body language, that they set a baseline for your anxiety levels, and then they work off that baseline. So I was a subject, a guinea pig, more or less, in a study where they were reading if I was lying or not. So what they told me was, because they gave me some insight into how it worked, I was asking a lot of questions, that a lot of lying is given away in the nonverbal communication, but that people who are good liars rehearse. That's all. Like actors. What is an actor but a liar? They're pretending to be someone they're not, saying things that aren't true, convincingly. And they're able to do so because they rehearse it. So here you have these astronauts who are constantly make-believing all day, all night. So when you ask them, hey, what was it like? They can describe the physical sensations and not be lying. I really noticed this in the book Spaceman by Mike Massissimo, where the entire book is about how he's afraid to swim and how he has to get his scuba diving lessons, and he has to learn how to scuba dive so he can go to space, because that makes total sense, right? And at the end of the book, when he finally goes to space, the final chapter, he talks about it for 2 paragraphs. And he says, yeah, it reminded me of being in the neutral buoyancy lab, floating around in Texas. Like everything he said about space was a reference to being in the swimming pool. And I thought, they probably try to give him a physical basis for this experience that he's claiming to have. And he still couldn't separate the memory from his actual physical basis, which wasn't space, but was in fact a swimming pool where astronauts play at going to space. The Ultimate Omega Speedmaster X. So if you want to know, the watch that they wear to space is called the Omega X33. And I think it ties into the supposed Mach 33. Maybe it ties into this. Freemasonry and the 50th anniversary of lunar landings. This is from the Scottish Rites. This is from the Masonic magazine. So you're going to say this is a conspiracy theory. Well, tell the Masons. Anyway, it has a list of the various astronauts who are Masons. I think one of them was in a Masonic lodge in Texas. And I think they put a lodge on the moon. Kind of like Richard Byrd put a lodge at the North Pole and the South Pole. John Glenn Jr., 33rd degree, achieved fame as the third American to be launched into space and the first to orbit the Earth. Leroy Gordon Cooper Jr., 33rd degree. Anyway, this is a list of all of the various astronauts. I think it's a fascinating story when you go into the subtext because I think there's something more to it. I think the lunar landing, the Apollo 11, has something to do with the Tower of Babel and the incursion into the heavens. We have a call here. Infinite Plane Radio.
Hello.
Hey, what's up, caller? Do you believe that man went to the moon?
No.
Just
Nope. I wasn't there to confirm it, so what do I know?
Right. Well, what about India? Do you think India's lunar landing was, I don't know.
I heard that somebody was talking about that today, and they said the video was like really bad.
It was good for like 1980s video games graphics. But yeah, bad if you're trying to pass it off as a contemporary moon landing, sure.
So just a quick story in reference to the one-eye thing.
Okay.
A villager went to the river to get dinner. He caught a magical fish. The fish said, "If you let me go, I'll grant you one wish of anything you want." So the villager said, "What should I wish for? A castle? A ship to sail the ocean? Or 100 pounds of gold?" And then the fish said, "There's one caveat. Whatever you wish for, I'm going to grant your neighbor 2 of." And he said, "Well, if that's the case, poke one of my eyes out."
What? That is a terrible wish. Right, but yeah.
But you get it, dude. Right?
Absolutely.
His neighbor's going to be blind.
Yes. I wouldn't want to live next to that person. But there is a mentality though where some people feel like they get ahead when other people fail. And I've always been like, no, you lift everybody up and you kind of, rising tide lifts all boats. But the world we live in, people will pluck out both your eyes if it meant a competitive advantage rather than granting themselves something that would move them forward in some tangible way. Not everyone, but there is that mean streak.
Yeah, the spirit of the world we live in nowadays, or probably was always like that, I guess.
I think so.
It's supposed to be. I don't.
Well, I think what we're seeing here is, it's fascinating to wonder how back this thing goes, but my basis for interpreting any of the psychodrama seems to be its correlation to the astrotheological, the oldest religions, the oldest mythologies, that the flood myth of climate change is as old as the Epic of Gilgamesh, however old that is.
Yeah, Gilgamesh had a flood story too. Like there was a flood story, I think it was Gilgamesh's, before Moses. It was like almost exactly the same as Moses.
Oh yeah. Yeah, this is why I argue against biblical literalism. One, because you can find it to be templated personifications of the astrological cycles. But 2, it's all plagiarized. All of it. NASA is a plagiarism of Mystery Babylon. Hey, Jay Diggs asks if you're calling from a supply closet, and Eric of Bear suggests that maybe you're in a clothes dryer.
No, I'm in a brown truck, slanging cardboard.
Okay, well, I hear you loud and clear. They're just curious as to where you're at because we're everywhere. For all we know, you're in a tunnel
Yeah,
beneath Maui looking for the missing children with Tim Ballard, right?
yep, yep. And that's funny. I went to Maui this year, at the beginning of the year, and when all that went down, I was like, man, I guess I'm glad I went when I did, because it's beautiful there. But I was looking at the top of the volcano there, and I saw that military base up there, and it looks pretty I mean, it looks pretty extravagant from the bottom. But then I found out it's one of their main things up there is directed energy. I mean, I don't know what that means, but
Interesting.
it's one of the spots in America where that's what they do.
I heard
There's
that
not
if you,
many of them, and that's one.
I heard that if you painted your roof blue and signal that you're a Democrat, they wouldn't burn your house down.
Yeah, they were seeing that today, that blue stuff. They were seeing that on Jones today. There's anything blue, and then they're like, oh, there's blue T-shirts and burned down houses. And I was like, okay, so the house burned because it wasn't blue, but the T-shirt didn't. But if the house is burning, the laser doesn't need to hit the T-shirt to burn it. The house is going to burn the T-shirt. So and it was Stu Peters talking about it. So it's like, did Stu Peters have somebody go down there and throw some
Sounds.
blue shirts in the burnt down houses?
Yeah, Stu Peters will sell blue shirts. This will protect you from dues.
Yeah.
It's like the color-specific direct energy weapon is the new race-specific bioweapon. They have all
Yeah.
these magical weapons that don't exist. They're scared of. Nama asks if you're UPSing while IPSing.
I can't confirm or deny that, but it's a good guess.
Yeah, I was gonna say don't give away your location. We have people watching us.
But yeah, they say those UPS guys are all rich now.
Yeah, I hadn't
They
heard.
just had a contract go through, and they're going to be making like $50 an hour now.
Wow, I had to look into it. A side job. That sounds like something I could do.
Yeah,
I mean, I like
you just got to
driving.
learn how to.
I mean, do you get bored? I don't.
Yeah,
When I'm driving, I'm like, I find.
no, you got to learn how to deal with management. They're like Nazis.
Oh, I see. You see, that's my main
Yeah,
thing. I've always had an issue. I'm not anti-authoritarian, but I've always had an issue with management and being told what to do. That's why I took my morgue job. I was like, I work alone. Nobody wants to do it, and I'm just left to do my job. Nobody's looking over my shoulder. Much better. I cannot stand being micromanaged, but we do what we have to.
as long as you know how to stay off the radar, you basically are doing your own thing.
Yeah.
Because they got everything wired. They got everything literally like wired up where they know speed, if you're stopping fully at stop signs, all that stuff.
Interesting. Well, at the very beginning, I talked about the moon landing being fake and the Kubrick thing. What's your take on nuclear bombs? Because there was this plan before they landed on the moon to nuke the moon to like flex their strength. But what is your take
Yeah.
on the nuclear bomb? Do you think there's any truth to it, or do you think it's psyop?
I mean, I always thought they were real. But listening to you for a while now, I guess I can't really say that because I've never been there to see one blow up.
Well, they're certainly
You know?
fake. They're fakeable. We can make the argument that they are fakeable.
I mean, I definitely think they got stuff that'll blow the shit out of a lot of, like really big explosions. I think they can manipulate really big explosions. I think those are real. Whether they're nukes or regular explosions, I don't know.
Well,
And the directed energy stuff makes sense to me because it's frequency, and frequency is everything. And depending on how you manipulate frequency, it could be everything's got a good and bad side, So it's like you can manipulate frequency in a good way or in a bad way.
Well, I watched this YouTube video where this individual took a mirror and he cut it into many pieces, and he made one of those solar heaters, those sun heaters, where he has this big dish and he puts all the glass in there, all the mirrors, and then he's able to boil water, heat coffee very quickly with this stuff. And I've heard of birds roasting, flying over these things. I don't know if that's true, passing by like solar panels. But my point is, yeah, there's real stuff, and you can find patents where people are looking into this. But then there's the point
Yeah,
where,
I mean, like,
yeah,
my bad.
we'll have to
Go
question
ahead.
like with Maui, for example. I think the do seems plausible on purpose. So they get half the population thinking something more happened than just climate change. But both sides are debating over the cause, and neither side is saying, well, maybe nothing happened. Maybe this is a controlled demolition, which is what I think. Controlled demo.
Yeah, yeah. I think something happened. Like, somebody did some effed up stuff, you know? I mean, I would have to imagine if I was able to get back to Maui and I went north to Lahaina, because where I stayed was south of Lahaina, I'd have to imagine that shit's all roasted up there. But, I mean, like you said, maybe it's closed off set.
I think
But I do
closed.
believe in frequency because I can see with my own, like I could do my own stuff and figure out the frequency can be beneficial or not beneficial. You know what I mean? I do believe in that because everything is frequency.
Well, the line is where science becomes science fiction. Like, for example, you could argue that NASA does a ton of science. Most of what they do is science. They have real pilots, they do real aerodynamics, they work with all kinds of technology that is just very sophisticated. However, there's a point where their science becomes science fiction, and we don't have the security clearance as civilians to know where that line is. But there is a line. That's why I've been saying for some time that once you cross that Kármán line, 62 miles, it's all CGI. It's all cartoon.
Yeah, yeah.
There's real crime. We all know there's real crime, real deaths, real murders, but then they have the sensationalized versions on TV that they only advertise and promote because they have a specific scapegoat that they're going after.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's all I really had.
Cool. Well, hey, I'm glad you called.
I saw that story when you were talking about that stuff, and that's one of my favorite little stories.
About the one eye, about the neighbors and they're poking out of the eyes.
Yeah, I actually got it from a Russian guy. So it must be, like, really bad story,
Oh, wow.
Russian story. It must be terrible.
Yeah,
Everything Russian
it's
is terrible.
it's a very sadistic use of a wish, but very interesting story. Anyway, thanks G33 for the call as always.
Yeah, take care, brother.
All right, there's G33, UPSN, well, IPSN, cannot confirm or deny. We'll just say we'll just leave it at that. Now, this is what I alluded to. Project A119. It looks like Apollo 11 and a reverse 9/11. And 199, you'll notice there are a number of movies that we talk about, like Donnie Darko, that have themes of stuff falling from the sky that came out on 119. Genesis 119 references the fall of the Tower of Babel. The 119, 9/11 reversed. This number has quite a lot to do with many of these various psyops. But additionally, Project A119 was a project to detonate a nuclear weapon on the moon. During the Cold War, the Soviet took the lead in the space race with Sputnik in October of 1957. Hey, on 10-4. I knew that number was standing out to me, 10-4, the emergency alert they're giving us. On 10-4, Sputnik was the first artificial satellite to orbit the Earth. Following this, NASA wanted to kind of flex their own powers and nuke the moon, but they canceled it in 1959 out of fear of a risk to the population. Oh, they're thinking about you. They were worried about nuclear fallout that could affect future lunar landing projects. So they were going to nuke the moon to win. It's like, oh, if we can't win the race, nobody can. They were going to blow up the moon because the Russians were going to get there first. Air Force Special Weapons Center, Kirtland Air Force Base, New York. In fact, when the news crew comes down here for that interview, I suggested we meet up at the Atomic Museum, which is just down the street a few miles, close to the Air Force Base, and there's a big fake missile out in front, a big dummy missile. Not like the real one that if it fell, it could blow us all up, but no, it's just a dummy. But we have entire monuments to the hoaxery everywhere. Okay, let's see what else is going on here. All right, we have 55 people in chat. We have a number of people over there on Odyssey. Thanks everyone for joining. I didn't send out live notifications, but I will send this out in the archives here shortly. We will likely be live later in about 4 or 5 hours. I'm getting the studio prepared for Monday. I want to say thanks to IFEPA 73. You got the last copy of the hardback of Autohoaxology 101.